Thank you everyone for joining. We'll just give this a couple of minutes because I can see the attendees coming through and people logging on. So we'll just let things sort of go where people are still coming through. So we'll give it a couple of minutes. Great. Okay, well, we are at 3 minutes past 12, and I know we've got a pretty packed agenda, so we will get moving and get going with this. We also are recording the session as well, so we will forward this out to everybody and there will be access for that as well. But thank you everybody for joining the webinar here today with Capco and partnering with Scope. We're really excited to host the webinar for you today, talking about working with a disability, and really pleased to have on board with us Scope, who are one of our partners within our sort of D&I. So thank you so much for that. What I thought would be good, first of all, I'll just run you through what you can expect today. So a little bit of an overview of what that session is going to look like, if we can go to the next slide. But before I do that, sorry, I will introduce myself. I'm Joanne Lee. I actually am Global Program Lead for Capco within our talent acquisition function. I've been with Capco for 10 years and had various roles throughout that time within our recruitment and talent acquisition teams, leading the recruitment across the UK, but now focusing a little bit more on global programs and working a lot more closely with D&I, which leads me to partnering with Razan today. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Razan Abdelgadir and I'm really excited to be here as well. So I'm part of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion team here at Capco, and I work specifically looking at external programs and partnerships to help support Capco's strategic priorities around DEI. Joe and I have been working together on this webinar, and partnering with Scope was really important to us. They are a partner for us that helps to bridge the gap around disability and provides support to anyone who's looking to apply for a role. So it was very fitting in terms of what we're focusing on. So yeah, really, really excited to talk you through the webinar today and hear from everyone. So
great. Thanks, Razan. So just going on to the overview of today, and just to let everybody know, there are subtitles, so there is a live transcript at the screen if you have any difficulty sort of hearing us. I think if you just click, there should be CC at the bottom, and you should be able to log on and see that transcript as well. So let's get started. So first of all, we will talk you through a brief overview about Capco. If you're not familiar, to give you a brief overview of who we are and why this is important to us. Then we will hand over to our friends at Scope, who are going to give you an overview in terms of what Scope do, how they can help you, and really how we have started our partnership here with Capco as well. Then we will hear from some of our employees here at Capco, really getting to hear about their personal stories and journeys, about how they've adapted to workplace and working particularly within management consultancy and financial services. And then from there, we'll actually give you all the opportunity to ask them some questions, to get some more insight into their experiences and how that can help. And we'll have people on the panel from Scope and Capco as well. So that's the overview of today. So just for those of you who aren't familiar with Capco, just a really brief overview. We are a Wipro-owned company. We're a global technology and management consultancy firm, particularly sort of driving digital transformation and technology within financial services. We really operate at that sort of business and technology intersection, and really sort of combine a lot of what we do with innovative thinking. So what we'll do, certainly you'll hear a lot more about what it is to be a management consultant from Helen later on in the webinar today, and she'll give you a little bit more context. But for me as well, personally, being part of recruitment, working within a global organisation, and I think why it's really important for us talking about this topic here today. You know, it's really important for us at Capco, I think, to really have an inclusive working environment. People are our assets here at Capco, so it's particularly important for us to make sure that we're bringing people on board. We're making it as easy as possible for people to start that recruitment journey, and making that sort of that process as painless as possible. I've certainly seen a lot of changes over the last 10 years of how we've adapted and changed our recruitment process to make it more inclusive. And as I said, I think that's something that's really key for us. And I think one of the key things for us at Capco here is we really understand, and I think it's in our DNA, about being yourself at work, having an inclusive environment, and that diversity is really key for us to really then have a well-rounded, innovative workforce. So that probably leads me on at a good place to hand over to Razan when we're talking about diversity and inclusion of Razan's role and why D&I is so important to us.
Thank you, Jo. So diversity, equity and inclusion is a core component at life at Capco. Before we even had a team, so I actually joined in July alongside one of my colleagues, Emma Cummings, and also the D&I team is headed up by Dee McDougall, who is based in the US. And all of us together work to ensure that we're driving diversity and inclusivity across the business. But before we were even here, Capco's culture has actually been driven through our affinity groups and our Be Yourself at Work initiative, which has really been the driving force and the heartbeat of amplifying an inclusive culture. So we're really excited to actually have a team that is dedicated to looking at these initiatives, and the fact that the business is investing in that is a true testament to the commitment. We're focusing on 4 priorities, which you can see I'm presenting currently. So really driving inclusivity around inclusion and respect and belonging, and really fostering that culture. The other thing we're looking at is increasing opportunities for diverse talent. So, which is why I said partnerships such as Scope is really, really important, because although we are on a journey, we certainly don't have all the tools and all the answers. So this partnership will help us to bridge the gap and aid our efforts in being equitable as an organization. So we're really, really excited to be working with them. And some of the other things we're focusing on is being a leader in our field, not just internally, but also benchmarking and making sure we're leading the way across the sector, and also building more diversity. So hopefully a lot of you who are here today can learn a little bit more about how to navigate through life as a consultant, and also maybe even look to seek some support through Scope. Which leads me on nicely to talk about some of the individuals that you're going to hear from today. And we have an amazing panel of people that are going to be talking to you, but also we've got a Q&A section at the end. So please, if you have any questions throughout, drop them in the chat, or you can send them anonymously as well. So for our panel, we have Helen Needham, Managing Principal Consultant here at Capco. Helen also heads up our Ability at Capco Affinity Group, and she'll be talking to you shortly about her experience. We also have Irini Basta, who will also be part of the panel and will share her experience and her journey. Irini is a consultant at Capco. We have Sam Perfield, who's I'm gonna pass on to shortly. Sam works as a support advisor within Scope, and she's gonna be talking you through how you can get involved, how you can seek that support directly from Scope. And then as part of our panel later, we have Rhonda McPhail, who is an employee engagement specialist at Scope, and Guy Shodor, who is National Employment Programme Manager at Scope. And both have a wealth of knowledge and will be able to answer some questions later on. So as I said, just try and come up with the questions as you go along, or just drop them in the chat, and we'll go through them later. So I'm going to pass you on to Sam to give us a bit of an insight into Scope and what they do. So Sam, I'm going to hand over to you.
Lovely, thank you. So I'm, as everyone's introduced me already, but I'm Sam and I'm an in-work support advisor for Scope's Support to Work service. So what I'm going to do is I'll just give a quick overview of Scope, a bit about our partnership, talking about our jobs board and more about the in-work support service as well. So at Scope, we provide information and emotional support when it's needed most to many families and disabled people across the UK, and we campaign for a fairer society. So there are approximately 14.1 million disabled people in the UK, and disabled people are almost twice as likely to be unemployed. So that's why we set up our employment programs. So as part of our employment programs, we support disabled people looking for work, but also to bridge that gap of unemployment for people that are disabled as well. So I'm going to be talking a bit now about the partnership with Capco. So that came about when we get in touch with previous organisations and our customers to see how they've been getting on, to see if they've secured a position and if they need any further support. One of our previous customers told us that they had applied for a role at Capco and were successful. So that was really great, and they told us that the process was really positive when they were onboarded, as well as getting involved in the neurodiversity network as well, which I think will be spoken about a little bit later on. And yeah, so they just really appreciated the support they were given with that. So as part of Scope, we are always interested in sort of other organisations who can provide and sort of promote roles for disabled people. And this is how we kind of found out and got in touch with Capco to find out what other opportunities they could offer. So that was really great. So I'm just going to focus a bit more on our support to work service. So it's an online and telephone support for disabled job seekers across Wales and England. So when a customer applies and registers with us, if they've met the criteria, they're assigned an employment advisor, and this is to help them to develop skills and attributes that they need for employment. And it's very much depends on what our customers' needs are, but we try and offer advice and guidance over CVs, cover letters and application forms to start off with. But there might be other things that need to be addressed, such as how does it affect benefits if someone goes into work, so we can advise on that, as well as looking at reasonable adjustments as well. Talking about disability to an employer, in case that's something someone wants to do, and also looking at the interview process, building confidence and job searching advice. So that leads me on to our jobs board. So we have our own jobs board, which is available to our customers, and it's very sort of tailored to the kind of roles that they would like to go into, or maybe if they're not sure, it's got a good variety, and it's across different sectors such as the public, private, and it's kind of, and the voluntary sector, sorry, I meant to say that. And so it's really helpful to have a variety, as I said. Some of the roles are finance, retail, those kind of things like that. And it's, a transport, and so there we go, sorry, administration, education, technology, media, and health and social care. So there's quite a mix there, which is really great for people looking at different things. So it's really helpful because we have it free of charge for employers to sign up, and it helps to attract disabled customers to make it inclusive. Like Joe was saying earlier, it's helpful to promote like a diverse workplace, and it also helps to do joint webinars like we are today, which is really great. So we try and promote different roles, as I said earlier, from different sectors, but we're now working closely in partnership with Capco to promote roles that they sort of advertising, and we have regular meetings with them to make the process as inclusive as possible, which is really great. So with our in-work support service, if someone's successful in getting into work, we have a team that can help them to do that handover so they're not just left to go into work without that support. And that support can be for up to 6 months to help them through their probation period. And this is very much dependent on what kind of role someone's going into and also the kind of needs that they have. So generally it would be looking at general onboarding concerns that someone might have, well-being in the workplace, feeling confident in their role when they first start. Some of the things that could also be helpful is disclosing and discussing health conditions and impairments with an employer. This is a safe space for them to kind of practice maybe what they want to say, but also kind of we encourage those conversations with the managers just so that they can try and talk about the adjustments that could be helpful for them. So yeah, so reasonable adjustments, but also access to work, which we're happy to sort of go through that process. We check in halfway through probation period, but also when somebody has reached the probation period as well, to make sure they have all the things they need. So it's kind of up to our customers how much support they would like. So some might have a month's support, others might have the whole 6 months, but it's very much dependent on what someone would like support with. And we have, just wanted to mention that Capco have their own internal process, but not all employers do. So that's a really positive thing. And we're there to offer any additional support that may be required as well. So thank you. And I think we're handing over to Helen now, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. That's really insightful. And I think if anybody's got any questions for Sam, please put those in the chat. We can answer those at the end. But now we move on to Helen. Helen's one of our managing principals here at Capco and also leading on the affinity group. So Helen, over to you.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks for Sam for taking us through that. My apologies to anyone who was trying to follow that. We had a few issues with the slides and that it kept moving forward. So they will be available if anybody afterwards, if anybody requires the slides, just to let you know. So as I was introduced, I am, and Jo mentioned, I'm one of the managing principals. That means I'm part of the senior leadership team at Capco, and I, for the past few years, have been working in the data practice as part of the data management team. And what I really want to talk to you today is about my journey at Capco. I've been around at Capco for over 13 years. I am also autistic. I was diagnosed 3 years ago. And so part of my journey at Capco has involved struggling without understanding why, finding out about myself post my diagnosis, and then working to find a way to be successful at Capco in a way that works for me and considers my various needs within the workplace. And that's what I'm hoping to share with you today, as well as some of the work that we're doing through the Ability Network and in the UK, the Neurodiversity Network that I started 3 years ago. So one of the first things that I often get asked is, what do you mean by management consultant? What do you do? And I think of myself as a problem solver. We go in, clients have a challenge. It could be in a different domain. It could be that they want to come up with a new target operating model and they need help and guidance on the best way in which to do that. And that's effectively what we do, whether we're in capital markets or whether we're in data and technology, we help them solve different types of problems. And in order to do this, there is a large part of knowledge that we acquire along our journey, as shown in the top half of the slide. So if we look at, in terms of our domain knowledge, various different key areas specific to financial services, and they're all in terms of different types of challenges and problems. And we have a set of toolkits and methodologies, which is effectively a recipe for how we go about trying to solve those problems or specify a solution to overcoming challenges or bringing about new opportunities. And the skills that we're looking for in our consultants fall into two key categories, as I mentioned: problem solving, which for me is a particular area that I love. I love to solve problems. I love to understand what we can do with our data and derive new insights. And then there is a big part of it which is focused in and around our interpersonal skills. For me personally, this is an area that I've struggled with over the years, and led to a lot of anxiety for me. And as I talk about my journey at Capco, I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail, because what I have found is through Capco and my time at Capco, sometimes it's about looking at the skills that I have, how to make the most of that. What can we do to bring about a change in the environment? And for the areas that I struggle in, how can I partner with people around me to achieve the outcomes that I need to in order to do my job as a consultant? So my journey, if we move on to my journey, I started pre-Capco as I was a computer programmer, a developer, and a business analyst. I worked predominantly on my own in very small teams, and I got to focus predominantly on the problem solving that I love. And that is what brought me into Capco. As a senior consultant, so if we think about that, we have a number of different grades, starting off as entry-level grade as associates, and then 2 levels above that is senior consultants. And I loved it. I loved going in, my first bank, and being able to deal with a challenge. One of the first roles that I was involved with was that there was a big data migration where there was a bank who had a US operation, and they were looking at how they could move that whole book of work and their clients from the US to the UK. And what we had to try and understand is, how do you approach that? And looking at it from different angles, from the angle of the clients, from the angle of what is needed within the technology solution, and more importantly, how do you phase the transfer of data to ensure that you avoid any risks of data loss or the bank not being able to function. It was in the FX space, and they were one of the big FX providers. And it was a little bit of a gulping moment when they said to me, if we get this wrong, it's making the news. So nothing like a little bit of pressure, but I loved it. Got to do a lot of gathering of information, requirements gathering, and then trying to come up with a strategy that was able to cater for all of the different things that we needed to do. Off the back of that project, after about a year, I was excited to get promoted to principal consultants. And I started to move from being a business analyst to now leading a team of business analysts and a project manager. And I had a significant more experience, and people were expecting a lot more of me. And whilst I was really good at delivering work by myself, it turned out that as a manager, my intention to help people, to provide them very specific directions, was often interpreted as micromanagement. As I talked to more and more senior clients, and the politics and trying to get people to understand what needed to be done, I noticed that there was a lot more conflict. You had different teams in the bank who had different opinions, and you had to negotiate between these different groups of people and deal with the conflict. And what I found is that rather than helping to resolve the conflict in those tense situations, I seemed to be adding to it, which is not ideal for a management consultant, I have to say. And you can see that what then happened is that I lost confidence in myself. I didn't have a team, and so my team weren't getting out the best. And I started to struggle at Capco, and my anxiety increased. And for a number of years, I continued to battle. And it was a bit like Groundhog Day, trying new and different things, reading lots of self-development books, going on as much training as I could at Capco, and talking to HR. And people were saying, okay, well, what's the challenge? What help do you need? And I didn't know. I couldn't give them an answer. And I found that I ended up being asked to move on from a client project because they didn't feel that confidence in my delivery capability. And I started to wonder whether I had what it takes to be a management consultant, because I struggled with people. And as I spoke on the previous page, people skills are such a core part of our job. And as I struggled and I was battling with my anxiety and wondering whether consulting was the right career for me and being questioned about my performance, you know, I was seen as being really good at delivery, but on the people side, I needed to improve. So, and I looked at a lot of my colleagues who were being promoted past me, and I thought, how do I become this social being, this, you know, effervescent management consultant with fantastic people skills? And I tried, but it just wasn't me, and it didn't feel natural. I didn't feel I could be myself at work. A few years later, I'd had a son, and he was starting school, and he started to struggle at school, and that led on to him being diagnosed as autistic. And as I learned more about autism, and particularly autism in women, it resonated with me, and I realized that that was much of my story. And that then led me to seek and go for a diagnosis. And as I got that diagnosis, I realized that it wasn't that I'm difficult. It isn't that, you know, I'm trying to be difficult. It was that I was different. And in order for me to be successful as a project manager and as a management consultant at Capco, I needed to tap into my strengths, that problem-solving capabilities. When it came to the people side of the job, I needed to approach it differently. And so as a consultant, we do a lot about thinking of, for clients, outsourcing and thinking about that. And so I chose to outsource my sociability. I started to bring people into my team that were incredibly sociable. And I partnered with them to help me navigate through the situations that I found socially challenging. And I found the answer that I needed to find a different way of working. And I started to talk to HR and the team and to find different ways in which I could do the work that I needed by partnering with people on the people side and really tapping into my potential and my strengths, which is in and around that problem-solving area. I had a lot of knowledge around, you know, from my time in terms of domain and the different methodologies. And that was the thing that started to bring about a change. And as I started to shift that perspective, suddenly my ability to deal with multiple client projects increased, and working with teams, we started to work much more effectively together. I went from working on my own independently, as you can see here on the size of the circles, to bringing up the size of the teams. I grew my team from a team of 2 to 30 within a year. I achieved my promotion to managing principal 6 months after my autism diagnosis and trying a different way of working. And I felt a lot more satisfied within the workplace because I felt I was being true to myself. And since then, I've gone on to manage teams of over 70 people. I have client projects involving upwards of 100 people with different clients. I coach a number of people as protégés and offer them guidance and direction. And as the team mentioned earlier, I established the Neurodiversity Network, and I now also run the Global Ability Network. And what I'm really proud of is last year, in the annual leadership survey at Capco, which is voted for by fellow employees, is I was identified as one of the top leaders at my grade, which was a massive personal achievement for me, given that just a few years ago, I had been seen as challenging and difficult. And so that really spurred on my desire to bring about a change at Capco, not just for me, but for other people like me who were struggling in silence. If we move on to the next slide, we can see that the three key areas that I found really worked was, for me, is being able to form partnerships with the team and the leadership team, finding a different way of working and building out a support structure. One of the great things that I love about Capco is the partnership and the ability to go in and talk to HR. When I first was open about my autism diagnosis, I went straight to the head of HR and the head of Capco UK, and they were really supportive to bring about a change, to embrace neurodiversity. And more recently, we've expanded to say that we need to do more within the disability space. One of the things that has really made a difference for me is being able to access a Capco counsellor, somebody who can guide me through my anxiety and the challenges, who talks and is specific to Capco so they understand the working environment that I'm in, which I think makes a huge bit of difference. And then, of course, it's that employee community, finding people like myself who may be struggling or have a different way of needing to approach things. And as an employee network, if we move on to the next slide, we've been able to start to bring about a number of changes. We have a working group that comes together with representatives of HR, recruitment, operations, and the employee network to understand our employee journey. Where are the barriers to current employees and potential employees, and how can we do things differently to bring about a change? We've talked about some of the external partnerships that we have started to establish, and we are currently working with the DE&I team and HR on a new and expanded reasonable adjustments policy. And the changes that we're making have been, in many cases, small. Subtitles on meetings, we're getting a hearing loops installed in our key areas, and we're looking at how do we support people through the recruitment and onboarding sides. So we focused a lot on what we can do to improve that new joiner experience. Now, it's been a long time since I joined Capco, and so I think it's only fitting to hand over to Irene, who has joined us at Capco in the last few months and can talk about what that experience has been like for her. Over to you, Irene.
Hi guys. First of all, thank you very much for having me. And I have so my name is Irene. I started working with Capco in July, and I wanted to kind of give you a brief overview of kind of my life, my career, and also my neurodiversity. If we can just move on to the slide. I wanted to say that before Capco, my career was really going well to an external onlooker. So I first moved to the UK in 2008. My first job was as a receptionist. I then moved across a number of different roles within finance and admin to land my first kind of data management job in 2012. But what was hiding behind that was high levels of anxiety, a very strong imposter syndrome, that I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be doing this thing. Feelings of failure. A lot of sleepless nights. Post the birth of my daughter, I had really bad postnatal depression. And I felt, at all times, I felt not at ease. And I felt like I could not belong. So I changed roles in 2018, and in 2021 I got my ADHD diagnosis. Now the diagnosis came about as a mere coincidence, where this woman was talking on TikTok about her diagnosis on ADHD, and she started kind of relaying her symptoms, and I could very much relate to them. For those of you that don't know, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. So we have two negatives on the same word, on the same title, but it doesn't matter. I will put the badge and wear it proudly, so to speak. And I think, so when I was looking for work, I wanted to say that, and one of the things that prompted me to apply to Capco was the fact that neurodiversity and the efforts of the company to be in the inclusion space, and that does not limit neurodiversity, but it also includes ability, it includes racial inclusion, it includes all these different areas where we need to foster equity in society. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised that it was very visible on their website, the lived experiences of Black people during Black Lives Matter. The neurodiversity section was clearly visible, and it made me feel very kind of comfortable that I'm very much about working, and I'm very passionate about my domain, data management, and very similar to Helen's kind of career journey. But I do want to work for an organization that has the right principles. Otherwise, I don't feel comfortable with kind of my values. And everything was very clearly visible, articulated, and it was the people, the employees, that were sharing their experiences. It wasn't something, and it didn't feel like a box ticking exercise. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that when I interviewed for Capco, the panel of interviewers was fantastic. I was open with them about my diagnosis because it was a brand new thing. And everybody was very engaged and eager to learn. So I think when I was successful, and then I was assigned a coach and a performance manager within the organization, my journey, I think I was experiencing the first, I was experiencing the same kind of support that I had during my interview process. And I think there is that momentum that is being built within the organization itself. I'm part of the affinity group. Within me starting the organization, I have been able to host 2 events on ADHD, raising ADHD awareness, which had good attendance, and everywhere I go, and to everybody that I speak within Capco, there is that environment of, I don't know about ADHD, but I want to learn. I want to learn how I can support you, and I want to learn what adjustments or what accommodations you would need to be very, very effective in your role. And one of the key things is that, you know, there's a lot to unpack with an adult diagnosis of a mental disorder. There is a lot to unpack, and there is a lot to unpack in terms of how you feel and your mental health, and how to bring your best self at work. But I think it's a level of encouragement and support that I feel this is the first time in my career that I feel at ease being myself at work. And I think and what this does, and this openness of mind, what this has prompted within the organization, or at least, you know, I shared a reflections piece that we issue on a Friday about my diagnosis, and I had colleagues reach out to me confidentially about trying to get their own diagnosis or the process. I had colleagues that wanted to speak to me about other problems that we're experiencing, and it's just opening the dialogue. And I have been part of the affinity group for neurodiversity, but I think because of the momentum that we have built as an organization, we are always on the lookout for things to help bring people to work and be their authentic selves. And for me, that is very, very important. As I said, I thought my career was going well, but it came with a very steep price from a mental health and from a satisfaction point of view. And that was before my diagnosis, and then I had negative feedback from line managers, but then I had very supportive feedback from others. But I think it was just the feeling that I do not belong here, that made things very, very difficult for me. And in 2012, I was my line manager at the time. We did a team building exercise that did the personality colors, and I was in a data analysis role that was very, very kind of deep dive into data and analysis, and I didn't come through with an kind of analytical personality. I was an enthusiastic personality, and at that point I really had a moment where I felt like I'm doing it all wrong. This is not my career. This is not what I'm meant to do. And my manager at the time, she said to me, she said, you need to focus on your strengths, and your strength is learning. Your strength is fast learning, quick learning, enthusiasm about learning. So she said, these are all the tools and things that I use to help my career be better, and find out, try it out, practice it, and see how you get on. And it was just that idea that I could acquire what is needed for, in terms of skills for my career, that really made a lot of difference. I think within Capco, the idea is we're on a journey, we're not stopping. There is momentum that is being built, and everybody has that level of awareness that we might not know, we might not have the answer, but we will look for the right answer, and we will make things work for all our people to bring in their whole selves at work, and more so to work on your strengths and your confidence. So that's all for me. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you so much, Irini, and to all of our panelists. I think it's been really insightful, and some real personal stories and struggles and journeys there. So hopefully you've taken a lot of insight from that. We are now going to move on to the panel. I think we've got a couple of questions that did come through. We've got one, I think it was actually for you, Helen. Can you maybe give us an example of the outsourcing of the social aspect and how that worked within the project team?
Yeah, absolutely. So effectively, it works in two ways. So I have, as I mentioned, as a manager, being able to have a supportive team. So especially when you're managing teams of 20, 50, 70 people, to keep everybody motivated, I recognize that that team spirit is really important. So when I am looking to build my team, I will bring in as a person in my deputy who has very strong social skills, and I will make part of their objectives is to embed and build that team spirit and the team engagement. When we go into client meetings, I will bring them in and use them as that person to kind of be that social oil, or what my husband refers to as the WD-40 of social interaction, to be able to make small talk. I really struggle with small talk. So having somebody else in a meeting, whether it's a peer or whether it's somebody in my team who can break that social tension in a new situation. If I'm going into a challenging situation with a client or a new client area, quite often, and in my current role, I'm partnered with a fellow MP to where we come at it from two angles. So they will drive a lot of the initial client discussions and interactions, and I will come through then to demonstrate and talk to in future propositions from the detailed knowledge. And so together we have been able to build up a number of client projects and within our portfolio. So building from both of ours, what it means, it works really well for him because he can focus on the social elements and the client engagement, which he thrives on, right? Means he does less delivery, which you will find for many senior MPs and partners is something that people enjoy because they focus more on business development, and I get to focus on the delivery sides. You know, and I think a lot of this is about also being open with my team. I talk upfront about how do you work best, and I talk to them about how I work best, and that there will be times that I can be prickly, or I can talk over people, particularly if they bring in me new information and news in meetings. So I ask them, look, that won't work for me. Can you send it to me in an email ahead of time so that we can talk it through? And I think that is something that has made a huge difference because it allows me time to process through new information and not react to it on the fly, which can quite often, that is when I come across as my most challenging because I'm trying to process and align new information into what I've got as preconceived views. And sometimes I struggle to see it differently, but I can over time.
No, that's some really good insight and tips there, Helen. And I think to your point is about collaboration with your team, but also I think setting that expectation really early on as well about being honest and transparent about how everybody likes to work. And we all like to think that any manager would do that in a team, but I know it's not always the case. But I think, you know, that goes both sides, right, for employees and managers to really talk about what works for them, how do they like to be communicated to, because I think we all have to adapt and flex our styles.
And it's had a real positive impact in terms of my team as well, because they feel more understood, more heard, more empowered, regardless of the backgrounds and experiences, because we all have different, you know, needs and strengths. And I think, you know, the strongest teams are when we identify what each of our individual strengths are and then create a team that maximizes our collaborative strength. You know, we talk about the power of diverse teams, and I think having those different ways of thinking, those different experiences, is absolutely what we need at Capco to be able to help our clients solve for a myriad of challenges and problems.
Exactly. No, thank you. That's a great answer. One of the other things that has come up is what advice would you give somebody who is unsure about whether to disclose an impairment, whether that be an interview or when they start a new job? I'm going to hand that one to Guy, your National Employment Manager at Scope. So hopefully you can give us some insight into that.
Yeah, definitely. And I always think it is very much about personal preference. So we don't give any kind of advice that's saying you must do this or you must not do this. I think it is about personal preference, but it's about getting the support you need. So if you need particular adjustments for the application process or for the interview process, be they access needs, or if you needed a BSL interpreter, for example, then that's where you need to ask for these things, and that's where you might talk about your disability on your application. It could be that you talk about it in your interview, as Irene mentioned, because she'd seen it on the website and seen really good things that Capco were doing. And we see that from a lot of employers that we work with, that people are very much encouraging people to talk about it. We do this very much as an organization. Or it could be that you do it once you've started employment to make sure that you're getting the right adjustments you need, which could be equipment-based adjustments or flexible working or work-based location. So I really think it is on a personal preference, but making sure that you're doing it to get the adjustments you need and to get the support you need to thrive in your workplace.
No, that sounds good. And I think to your point, Guy, it's about personal preference. And I think everybody's different. So that level of comfort might change depending on the experience and depending maybe what part of the process that somebody is in as well. One of the other things that has come to light, we've got some more sort of coming through. Okay, so we've got another one from Ram. Okay, what is the investment that an organisation needs in order to include such diversity and acceptance? Any takers for that one? I know, Helen, you've been leading some of our affinity teams as well. I know, so I know, Irene, Helen, have you got any comments on that?
So I want to speak about the, I don't want to speak about the investment in terms of monetary investment. I do want to speak about like other things that make organizations successful, such as employee attrition. It's far more important, and I feel that from my point of view at least, and this is a sense that I've got within Capco, that the investment we do is making our people more satisfied, and making employees more satisfied actually leads to other good things within the organization. So I don't want to talk about the monetary investment, because there are kind of levels of investment that you can do, and some of them can be quite small actually, but making a really substantial change, but then other are more costly. But I do want to speak about the value and the level of satisfaction of the employee, and the kind of safe environment that is being nurtured. So that's how I wanted to answer that question. I think Helen would probably tackle the more factual things.
Thank you. And I think, you know, what we've learned, and we, as at Capco, I think collectively, we are still at the beginning of our journey and learning through our partnerships with Scope and Business Disability Forum. And what we know is there are a number of key areas that we need to look at and we need to consider in terms of, you know, assistive technology. Have people got the right tools to carry out the job and be able to access our environment? What do we have in our buildings, and are those accessible for people with different needs? And then also our working practices, our processes, our policies, you know, are those considered for people with a wide range of needs from there. And I think the key place that an organization needs to invest in is to understand where are those barriers for potential employees, to see what you're doing well, to see areas that maybe you're not quite there yet. And that's why we're spending a lot of time trying to look at our employee experience and journey through different lenses to understand different employee experiences, both current and potential employees, because we know that the biggest difference quite often is one of mindset, and having a work supportive environment that enables people to succeed rather than acts as a barrier. I don't know, Razan or Rhonda, from a wider perspective, if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
Could I mention something? Is that okay, Joe?
Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to say that it could be, like, in terms of investment, it doesn't have to cost a business or an organisation any money. Some of the adjustments actually can be free. So, like what Guy was saying about flexible working, if someone had a medical condition that meant it was harder for them to get up in the morning, just starting at 10 o'clock instead of 9 is like a really quick thing. And so there's some adjustments wouldn't cost anything. And if there was specialist equipment needed, then Access to Work would fund that. And I think it's, if you are starting a new position and you apply within the first 6 weeks, it's not a cost to the employee or the employer. But if it's over that slightly, I think it means that there would be a contribution from the workplace. But I just thought it was helpful to mention that as well.
I suppose just very, very quickly from me, that it is really important that workplaces are representative of our society. And that in itself is a huge benefit when we talk about 14.1 million disabled people in the UK with, a range of experience, background, skills and abilities. That's so important that employers, there's so many benefits to having a diverse workforce, and that's a huge one in itself.
Yeah, and I think this is what we see, in our working group that we've established with representatives from across the organisation and our employees, because the key thing that we're investing in, is our time and coming together to find and to inform ourselves, and making a concerted effort to reach out to people that may have been previously missed in our Capco recruitment. So having sessions like this, because we know that quite often we are missing large groups of society, and that's where we want to taking the time to invest in how do we then reach to ensure that we have a greater reach from a Capco recruitment and diversity perspective.
Yeah, no, thanks, Helen. And I think sort of one of the other questions there was about sort of the rewards of that, and certainly myself being in a HR function and recruitment and talent acquisition, I think sort of having sort of the diversity, for our people within our workforce, I think is huge benefits of having so many different backgrounds and stories. It adds so much dimension to an organisation. Particularly for an organisation such as Capco, where, as I mentioned right at the beginning of this, people are our assets. It's our people that represent us. We want to have, to really have a wide sort of diverse workforce, and I think that really actually just gives us so much advantage in the market as well. That not every single person is the same, and we really sort of cherish that. And I think Irini, alluded to it in her story. Being yourself at work, I think is something that is really true to everybody at Capco. Look, we are just over the hour now, so I think some questions are coming through, but look, we're going to put some details of an information, a line up to contact us. We've also got Scope's details on there as well. But a huge thank you to all of the panels. I think some great insights to your personal journeys, your stories, which has been really great to hear. And thank you so much to Scope for partnering and continuing to work with us, and hopefully our partnership and journey will continue to grow. But great insight there of how you can support people that might not be interested in Capco, but might want some further advice of how to apply, or other organisations that you work with that might be more suitable, please do contact Scope as well. But thank you for everybody. It's been really insightful, and a huge thank you to everybody for joining and giving up your lunchtime.